you don't need to, because we will be using an online code editor instead. All right, so let's actually get started. So this is like a quick overview of what we'll be going through today. I just want to share a bit more about my journey as a software developer. Then we'll just hit right into setup, a few of web dev concepts. Then we will actually sort of like try to code together. And then the last part, a time slot just for you guys to ask me any questions that you guys have. So a bit about me. How did I become a software developer when I didn't have any coding experience prior to university? So I took the generic physics, chemistry, math, economic subjects in junior college, in Anderson Junior College. Now it's Anderson, so Rangoon Junior College. And I did decently well to get into SUTD, Information System Technology and Design. Now I think it's computer science and design or something like that. And that's where I learned the bulk of my programming basics and learn how to develop Android apps, and by extension, web development as well. From there, I did projects, I did internships, and my experience was enough to, to convince Thoughtworks to give me a chance to become one of your graduate software developers, where I'm still working today. So my current role at Thoughtworks, it's a mix. I might be developing apps or websites. I might be self-learning web development, app development on my own, or I might even be interviewing the incoming candidates into Thoughtworks. All right. So so pretty much that's my sort of my day life. But after work, I will usually I will be posting on social media, I guess, on TikTok. I will be posting about coding, tech jobs, coding jobs, and basically sharing more about what it's like to work in tech. And I guess part of that is because when I was in university, I didn't see a lot of representation. So I got sick of waiting around. And I decided to, to share my own journey and hopefully inspire more women like you guys to learn more about tech, break into the tech industry, and so on. Right. So today what we'll be focusing on is not just Python, but how you can use Python to develop simple websites, for example. So let's hit right setup. So all you guys have to do is to sort of like get that space for you guys to code. Go to tinyurl.com/py 2001 Women Who Code Singapore, I guess. Let me just see if I can. Yeah, I can't copy the link. So maybe one of the maybe Shreya or someone can paste it in the chat so that everyone can just like simply click on it instead. And then let me just check the chat. Right. Thanks, Shreya. So this is, once you click on this link, let me just follow along with you guys. Oopsies. Let me see if I can exit this presentation. All right, here we go. So once you click here, once you click on the link, if you are not already logged in into REPL, you will see this page. All you have to do is just to click here, click on Fork REPL, and then you'll be prompted to log in. If you don't already have an account, you can the REPL is free to use. So you guys can just do this. So I'll give a couple minutes for you guys to I'll give you guys like 2-3 minutes to set up before we move on to the next part. In the meantime, feel free to put down any questions into the chat, and I will sort of like take this time to answer any early questions that you guys might have. Okay, let's see. Oh, okay. Lee Sim mentioned that I got a message. The REPL didn't wake up in time. Please try again in 30 seconds. That's a bit weird. Hold on. Lee Sim, did you go to the link?
Yeah, I went to the link that you shared on your slides.
Oh, okay. That's
And then I click on fork repo. Um,
Let me see. Let me try
oh,
to mark it. Yeah, click on fork REPL. That should be the correct one. You click on fork REPL and then if
there will
you
be
can
a
just
code editor.
yes, there'll
Oh,
be
I
a
see a
code.
code editor now.
Yes. Awesome. Great. All right. So anyone else who needs a bit more time to set up your REPL? No one? Can raise your hand in the chat. Okay, then I guess you can continue. All right, so back to our slides. Oh wait, just to confirm, you guys can see my screen, right? I see that I'm screen sharing.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Just double checking. All right, so let's go back to our slides. Whoops, not that one. Here we go. All right, so back to here. And can you guys see the current slide setting up, and then you see it's a sort of like a code editor window?
Yeah, you can see.
All right, awesome, thanks. Okay, so here is what you should see once you fork your REPL and log into REPL. And it's pretty much a simple layout. You have your files on the left side. So whenever we create new files or we want to make folders to organize our files, that's where we will touch it. And right now you should be able to see under this cube here, a dependency called Flask. I will show you guys later. So the left side is pretty much the stuff that you will have in your coding project. This middle section here on the right side, not exactly the middle, you'll see this main.py file. That's what we will be changing to set up our Flask app using the Flask Python library. And at the top here is this green button. When we click this green button, that's what is going to actually sort of like bring our Flask app to life. So let me go back to our main.py to show you. Hold on, give me a second. Here, okay, this is the basic one, right? What you should be seeing under this cube here, packager, you should be seeing Flask. If it's not already there, then you can just type in Flask and you should see the Flask pop up. If it's a plus, that means you don't have the package and just you can just click it. Otherwise, if it's a trash can, that means you already have it. So don't click on the trash can. If it's a plus, click on the plus. If it's a trash can, don't click on it. All right, so here is basically everything that you need. All you really need is to start is your main.py file, your Flask dependency, and that's pretty much it. So now that we are here, yeah, I can show you guys. When you run the code, you will see at the bottom here something will pop up. That is your console. So whenever you are printing things or you are running some sort of Python command, Python app, there will be things that will pop up in the console. So if things go wrong, here is where you look for any errors. Okay, so back to the slides. Now we can go into a bit deeper about the actual big topic, which is web development. So when you see a website or an app, because those things sort of overlap, there are different layers to your websites and to your apps. So first of all, what's the difference between the code that you write for a website and the code you write for an app? So for a website, first of all, the programming languages would be different. But I would say other than the programming languages, the biggest difference is really just the screen size. Obviously, the websites or any apps that you have on your phone, it needs to be of a smaller size versus you going to a website on your PC or your MacBook. or your tablet, the look of the website will be different. Now, whichever app or website that you use, there will be different layers. So when we think about apps or websites, the thing that you're actually looking at is your visual interface, or in tech speak, I guess, is called the view. So the view is literally the design, the layout, the elements, the HTML, the elements that you see on the screen. But that's not all you need to develop your website or app. So here, okay, I'm just going to focus more on the website part of it. Let's say so that's the view and visual interface. The next layer, sort of like one layer deeper, you can think of it as on the left side is closest to the user, to the person that's actually using the app or website. And all the way to the right is more or where the developers will interact with the developers or any sort of like tech person would use. But the users don't necessarily change or interact with the business logic or the servers or databases. So what exactly is the business logic? The business logic, in a way, is everything that the user might not see that is directly related to the interactions on a website. So when you click a button, what happens? What kind of code happens behind the scenes? Does it connect to a database? Does it update things in a database? Does it load up certain pages instead of, the home page and that kind of stuff? So that is sort of falling under business logic. Now, the last layer that is the furthest away from the user is the servers and database layer. So you need to keep in order for your server, in order for your app to actually come alive, it needs to be online, right? But that means you need your codes, your images, a database, they need to all be online. So how the developing team do it is that they have the codes that for the website in a code repository, which is basically an online folder. And images also, images and any sort of like user data, or for example, event, like a specific website data stored somewhere in a database or some sort of online folder. Okay, so let's try to think of it. That's how the server database layer might look like. But let's think of an example. When you go to the Women Who Code website, you will see under the Singapore page, there is the upcoming events, right? And you will see there is the date, there is like the location, who is organizing it, Women Who Code Singapore, and the title of the workshop, right? So that's exactly what you'll see. And it's also what you will click on, what you will mouse over, what will pop up, and things like that. Now, once you click, let's say once you click on the event, what happens behind the scene is that the page basically tells the computer or tells like the browser, hey, this person click on the event, I want you to redirect them to the meetup.com link. So that happens behind the scenes, that happens in the back end, so to speak. So that is basically behind the scenes. And how does the database layer, the server layer have a role in this? You need to store like the event information, the workshop event information somewhere. So even on the Women Who Code website site, maybe they have some sort of website builder, but that data still has to be stored somewhere. So that might be in a database where it will be retrieved within this business logic layer. This also includes maybe like any icons or maybe images that you have. So that's the roughly the three layers of any website or any app. You have the view, the visual interface, you have the business logic, and you have the servers and databases. So now we're going to talk about the sort of like the jobs part of software development, of web development. You will hear a lot about oh, I work as a front-end developer, I work as a back-end developer, I work as a full-stack developer. What is the difference between these three roles? I didn't include full-stack here, but it's a mixture of the two. So the business logic has a bit of overlap between front-end and back-end, but the key difference of the two is that the front-end is mostly related to what the user will see. The back end is what you will be doing with the information that the user provides you, whether that's a button click or whether that's login information. So let's think again, another way. Let's say you log in to Facebook, you log in to Instagram or something. You will provide your email and your password. So the front end developer, they are in charge of developing the login form, and a bit of what happens when you press the button. They have to send the information to the business logic, and the back end developer has to remember the code in. Okay, I get this information from the visual interface. I'm going to pass that into an API, or basically some sort of interface that connects with the server or database and checks whether this email and password pair exists in our user authentication database. If let's say you have a wrong password, but the email exists, that information is going to be returned back to the business logic, and then that is coded by the backend developer. And a front-end developer has to code out how do you show that you have a wrong password to the user. So maybe the backend developer will code in, if the authentication server returns this specific signal that, hey, the email exists but the password is wrong, then the front-end developer has to code in something to show, the password is wrong but the email exists. So I have to write somewhere on the web page or the app that the user input the wrong password. So maybe like the under the text field, under the box of your password, there will be a red text saying, oh, wrong password. So that's roughly how, and it's sort of like the difference between the front end and the back end developer. Now, in that case, what is a full stack developer? A full stack developer can do both, but they might not necessarily do both at the exact same time. It ultimately depends on the company they work for, how they define a full stack developer. But ultimately, you should be familiar with how the front end works and how the back end works, so you know how to understand the flow of data and information between like these three layers. Okay, right, let me just quickly pause, check the chat if there's any questions. Okay, awesome. Let's see, let me go to the next slide. So now I know it's a bit quick, but let's check out building our website. Now this might be a bit intimidating, it might be a bit tricky, especially if you have never built an app before, but we'll slowly go through it. And if there's any questions, feel free to unmute or put it in the chat, and the Women Who Code volunteers will let me know if there's a pressing question. Okay, so what is in a web page? Now we're going to dive deeper into the web pages that you see. So I couldn't find image with women, but this is a great way to sort of like illustrate what each coding language does. So for those who are familiar with HTML and CSS, when you're building your basic web pages, the HTML is basically the code that specifies the things that you want on your web page. You want a paragraph, you want a heading, you want an image. So all those things is usually in your HTML code. But if you put only the HTML, it will look kind of boring, and it might look like something. Let me sort of like show you. how the HTML code itself might look like. So the HTML code for this test website will look something like this. But if I only have this in my code, it will look very boring. Like this already looks pretty boring, except for like the heading and the button. So how do we make it prettier, basically? That's where your CSS will come into play. Maybe you want to make this text blue. Maybe you want to make the button have a pink background. You will usually do that in your CSS. Now, where does JavaScript come into play? JavaScript is basically the inner workings, the interactivity of your website. So that's why it sort of like represents the muscles and the brain and the nervous system in sort of like this body character. Okay. So, but here we won't exactly be using JavaScript. We will be using Python Flask. So what is Python Flask? You can think of Python Flask as a way for you to set up a server, sort of like a server application where one part of the application sets up the server and another part of the application actually connects like the web pages and the data flow all together. So yeah, so that's a rough way of explaining it. So it's a web server gateway interface server application thing. And yeah, how we use Python Flask is basically you have your HTML file stored somewhere, you have your images stored somewhere, and we use Flask to set up a server and connect the pages together, and as well as figure out what is the flow of information that we're passing through a web page. So let's check out this one. This is the next slide. So now let's try to run our first very, very simple Flask app. So this is all that we need to set up our very, very basic Flask app. So I'm just going to type it out together with you guys, and feel free to unmute if you have any questions for now. So going back to our REPL, we're going to import our Flask object initializer, or basically the method or function that sets up our Flask application. So from Flask, import Flask. Then we are going to set up a variable that sort of like stores our Flask instance. So Flask, and we have underscore name underscore. So I will talk about the specific parameters later, but here is basically what you need. And then we want to app.run. We have our host, which is basically that sort of like the address that we want. And because we are sort of like doing this locally in our REPL, we are just going to use any IP address that we could find. So that's 0000. Okay. And then we also have our port. So I think we'll just go with something simple. Let's just put any 4-digit number in there. So what is the host and what is the port? Whenever you see a website, whenever you go to a website on your phone, that website is hosted usually on an IP address, and it's hosted on a certain IP address, and that's the host address basically. And the port, you can think of it as one way to get into the app. That's a very simple way to try and explain it. It will take me like more than 1 hour to explain the concept, but the basic thing that you need is that you need both the host and the port to sort of like go to a certain website or endpoint. So here we go. So here we have something simple, and let's just try to run it. Or if all goes well, we should be able to see something. And yes, this shows here's it might be a bit confusing, so let me just quickly explain. Right now we have successfully set up our server. Our server is running, that's why it can even like show us the 404 code. But you will see that, hey, how come our web page says not found? Shouldn't it show like, I don't know, an empty page or something? And that's because we don't currently have we don't currently have a web page to go to. It doesn't even have a home page. Like there is no HTML that we are referring here. And we need that in order to at least show, we need to at least have a page. Right now, there's not even a web page that we can go to. So before we go to the web page part, let's just quickly go through what are each of like these things here. So obviously we are importing the Flask function. Now we don't need to use a random, library, but in case, you know, you might be running multiple instances, maybe you're testing different things, then you might be better to have a random library to just give you any random 4-digit number. Yeah, so there's the and then like I explained before, there's a host and there's a port, which is what we need. Now this underscore name, it's sort of like a default reference variable that means the current working module, the current working package. Because remember, Python works in packages. Like you can think of it as a folder also. All right. So I'm just so that is how, okay, I don't see any questions, so that's fine. And then we go to here. Right. So now we know that, hey, our app doesn't really show anything and I want it to show something. Now we can add our web page, we can add what we call a root. Now, how do we do that? So you're going to add some code in between your app declaration and the function that's actually running our app. So you're going to type app.root, and then you're going to have this slash. So if you sort of like observe your websites, right? Some of them will have slash at the end, some of them won't have slash at the end. But this basically means the home page. It's sort of like the main page, so to speak. So this in our code means, hey, I want to load up whatever is under this whenever I have this root. So it basically means something like this lah. I can't type like that, something like that. Okay, roughly. So let's define a homepage function with no parameters inside, and we are going to return just maybe a hello everyone. Feel free to put anything else that you want in the string, but let me show you what happens when we restart this application. Because remember, this application isn't constantly refreshing the code that you changed. You need to rerun it every time you make a change. Okay, so, and here we go. Once we run the application, you can see there's hello everyone in the text up here. So we sort of have a page now, and it matches whatever is returned by our homepage function, which is basically hello everyone. If I change it to welcome to Ainul Loves Code web page, and I rerun it, it's going to update and say, we rerun it and obviously it's going to update with the latest code. So welcome to Ainul Loves Code web page. And let's say maybe you want to add your own number or variable. So maybe I have, let's say, a counter, and the number is, I don't know, maybe 999 or something. And then you can put something like call this number for emergencies. This is just an example, emergencies. And then we're just going to use it. And what we're doing here on line 8 is we are returning a string, right, to the web page. So in this case, we can just put counter. It should concatenate just fine. So concatenate is joining strings. So when we run our app, okay, it does not work because I forget. In some cases, you can't just simply add your string and your integer together. Let me just rerun that. And now you can see, let's see. Sometimes this does not work out well, and that's fine. Sometimes bugs happen. Okay, let's see. All right, I guess it's not. Okay, yeah, there we go. So you can see here, it sort of have this, it has our text and then it has our number that we put here. So we'll go back to this number later, but pretty much is how you can sort of like load up variables in your py file into your page. But what if, let's say you want to add more than just this, you don't really want to cram like your H1 tags, your paragraph tags all into one single string. So what we can do, we can have a HTML file. And I'll show, and I'll just, actually, let me just quickly check the chat. Okay, yeah. Like what Vanessa mentioned, you can also command enter or control enter to rerun the application. Otherwise, you can just click this button here. Click the run stop button. And now let's go to the next sort of like concept. Okay, now let's add a bit of personalization. Hold on. Let's add a bit of personalization. Let's say you want to add a favicon, that tiny icon you see in the tab, right? Now, if while the app is still running, I can click on this open in a new tab on the very right-hand side, that square with the arrow coming out. When you click that, you will see this, right? But you will see at the top here, at the tab, it just shows a globe. So on Google Chrome, it will show this icon when there isn't a favicon. It's sort of like a default favicon. But let's say we want to add a nice image, right? It's a few steps, but we are basically inserting an image. So let's go through it step by step. And I'm going to do it a bit slower. So first, we need to find an image. So what I like to do is I like to go to flat icon to just find some very simple icons. So I don't have a favorite instrument, but let's just choose this piano. It looks cute. And what I'm going to do is I'm just gonna download the image. Now, obviously, if you are going to do your own branding and that kind of stuff, maybe you don't want to just download a random icon or flat icon. This is sort of a demonstration. So now that I have an image, what I also need to do is I need to resize that image so that it fits the dimensions of a favicon. That right now, this icon is like, it should be 48 by 48 pixels, which is basically very tiny. That's why it can fit into your browser tab. One way is to manually resize our image. Another way is to just go to a favicon generator over here. So what this is going to do is it can convert your image. It can convert your image into a .ico, which is an icon file format. So just gonna drag this piano.png and the image should pop up here. Then you're just gonna click on download. Wait, it did just refresh on its own. Give me a second. Yeah, I think I have to drag it back. Okay, download. And then it's once you upload your image and you're just gonna click on download. This isn't the most intuitive website, but once you click on download, you should get a zip folder. So when you open up that zip folder, you should see, like now because this MacBook is gonna automatically unzip once I click on the zip file, but Windows is a different step. So, but basically, once you open the folder, you want to go straight to the .ico file format. You just want to remember like this location. Or over here. Just remember that where the file is. Then you're going to go back into your REPL and you want to import this image. But it isn't the best. Okay, let's just first add in our file. Click on the 3 dots and click on upload file. Go to wherever that icon is and choose the .ico file and open it. And then it should be imported here. Okay, you can even click on it and see And you will notice that if you open up the file, whether it's on your laptop or in Ripple, it looks pixelated. And that's because, remember, we have resized the image to be a lot smaller than it originally was. The original image was, I think, 412 pixels by 512 pixels by 512 pixels. So now that we have our icon uploaded here, let's now try to connect it to our main.py. Now, there's different, the ideal way is that we want to have a template. A template, you want to have a HTML file. So in Flask terms, they are going to call it a template file. So that's where we have to change a few more things in our Flask object here. So first, we want to have our HTML file. So let's first add a folder, and we are going to call it templates. Okay, this will be important later. So we have a templates folder, and I'm just going to add another file. I'll just put home.html like this. And then we have the page here. Okay. So what we're going to do is we are going to set up a quick HTML web page. So it's pretty much, you start with a HTML text on the very outside, and remember, you have to end off HTML with like this slash in front of it. Then, in order to have something in our title, need our head. So this head, it doesn't usually show up in your web page itself, in the whole web page itself. It might show up, it's sort of like behind the scenes knowledge. And not behind the scenes knowledge, behind the scenes information about the web page. So in our case, let's put in a title. Maybe it's welcome to my page. So this title is the one that will appear in the browser tab, or if you are searching on Google, right? The titles that you see is technically the title in the head. Now, how do we actually put in our favicon? We need to add in a link. So the code is quite long. There's a link, and then it's related. I forget what REL is, but it refers to the icon and what is the type of link, and then where the icon is. So the path is different here. I'll show you guys later. But here is the code that we need. So I'm going to type in link rel icon, I think. And then type different things, image slash x dash icon. And then we have our actual path, which in this case is href. And we are going to just have favicon.ico. And then we close it because it's a self-closing tag. Actually, it doesn't self-close, but it self-closes. So here we go. Now, what we can do for now is that we can just try to run this. So command enter. And see whether it loads up nicely in our application. So it doesn't seem to have any weird errors now. So let's also refresh our web page. Again, if you don't already have it opened up, you go to your web view. There's a square here with the arrow coming out. That will open it in a new tab. So I refresh and favicon isn't there. So I think that is because we haven't really told our Flask server that we actually have an icon hanging about here. So let me just show you guys how I think this should work. If I click on inspect, okay, it doesn't exactly show the error either. That's fine. So basically, our favicon.ico, it doesn't show up because we haven't exactly referenced it in our Flask app. Okay. Oh wait. I know why. We didn't put in our template. Okay. So, right. Earlier on, I was showing you about the HTML, and then I wanted to show you about the icon. But we haven't connected, we actually haven't connected the entire page. So my mistake. HTML to our Flask application. What you're going to do is that in your Flask on line 1, you're going to include a method, a function called render_template. This is what we will be using to load up our HTML file. So now we return render_template and then home.html. Now this should work. Let me fix the quotations. Let's try this first. If it doesn't work, then I'm sort of like following along with you guys to guide you guys through this. So right now we template. So let's double check it and refresh this. It's going to say welcome to my page. Again, we don't have anything. We only have stuff in our head text, which instead of our body text. So it's not going to show anything in the page, but you can see it says, hey, welcome to my page, which is matching up with our title. But our icon is still not showing up. And that's because Flask has another way to sort of reference the images and the locations of stuff that it's interacting with. So another good practice to do when you're interacting with Flask is to specifically link your templates, the folder that stores all your HTML files, and any image additional files that you have. So what we're going to do first is we're going to match up our templates folder, template_folder. So we want to match up our templates folder here with our Flask. So just for good practice. And then we just do something like this. So our template folder now matches up with our templates. So now when it's rendering our template, it's going to be able to search home.html. By default, it's actually already searching through the template for a templates folder. So if you just put home.html without the templates folder and you didn't match it up here either, it might not work as well. So if it isn't working, try having your HTML file in the templates folder and then matching it up in your Flask. So this is now we have matched up our template folder. Let's include sort of like the folder that has our favicon. Once our images, just don't put it all exposed right next to our Flask app, right? We want to put it in a folder. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to add another folder and name it static. So static sort of means that it doesn't really change, which is, I mean, our images shouldn't really change either, which is fine. And then in our static folder, we are going to also have an images folder. And then we're going to click and drag our favicon into our images folder. And this means that our favicon path has changed, which is fine. We know how to change it later. For here, what we want to do, I think, let me just, I think this should work. So type in static_folder, and then I think static. I think that should work. Let me just double check. Flask static folder. Yep, that's exactly what we need. I think, let me just check, blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, it should technically work. Static folder. And our home HTML right now is still set favicon. We're going to update /favicon. So now we have connected our HTML file, we have connected our image. So let's quickly refresh it and check that it's updated. It says invalid syntax. Let's go back to our main.py file, and we didn't add a comma. Now we did. Let's rerun that. Okay, so far so good. It's running fine. So here's another thing. You will see get. So when you are going to a web page, you can interact with the web page in different ways. if you search up HTTP status codes, you will see there's many different kinds like this. And 200 means that nothing is pretty much roughly that you're able to go to the page. The page basically exists. So here we have our home.html, and it's supposed to have our icon and stuff like that. So let's refresh our page here and see whether our favicon is updated. And you can see very tiny up here, our piano is there. Our piano image, which is our favicon, is up there. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly pause to check if the chat is open. That's fine. So yeah, we have our piano icon up there. Now, and that means our favicon is working, our image, our setup is working, and we are roughly almost done with our page. This is very empty. Okay, so that's what we will be working on next. Let's try to add a counter to our web page. So what is supposed to happen is, okay, other than having like, you know, a greeting and a bit of instruction, we want to have a button or some way to click to interact with our page and also update a number, our counter number. That's sort of why I had the counter here. So let's change it to 0. And now let's update our home.html page. So earlier on, I was talking about the head. Now, how do we put code in the actual web page? We use the body tag for that. I'm going to set up a bit of my web page, just hello everyone, and then have a paragraph that basically says tab to count up. And then we need some way, you can see here, we need some way to, for the web page to sense that there's a button click and then to update that page. One way we can do that is by using post request. So a post request basically means that, hey, your web page is sending information somewhere. In our case, we will be sending information into the Flask app through the, and that means that if you want to put a post request, one of the better ways to do it is by using a form. That's why we have this form here. So let's set up the code here as well. We are going here. We have a form, and then we have, I think, action. So if you're doing this in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, then usually action would be some sort of JavaScript, a bit of JavaScript code or some sort of other PHP code, for example, PHP file. But in our case, we're not really going to do anything. We are going to put the method of our form, like once we submit the form, is going to trigger a post request. So method equals post, and there we go. And then we need to remember to close the form. So here we also want to have a button. So there's two ways we can make buttons. So let me show you a pretty cool resource if you want to build websites, you want to refer to HTML or CSS. So this is one way. One way is we can simply use button tag. So if I click on try it yourself, right, it will look like this. So that's one way that you can put a button on your page. Another way is you can use input. Now you can see here, W3 Schools, which is the website, explains that if you want to put a bit of styling, italics or images, you can do that in button element. But for input, you don't, because input is mainly used for forms, you might not be able to add a lot of images there, a lot of like styling. So for a button in using input, we use the type submit. So if I try it yourself, you will see here, submit. This matches up with this line of code here. So this is another way that we can make a button in a form that will help trigger how the form works. Okay. So back here, we're going to put in our button. So input type submit, and we want to have a name to our input. So is just good practice. So I'm just going to call it, and then we want to put something in the button. If we don't have a value, if we don't have a value, let's say I remove the value here and I run it, it's not going to show anything. So let's also put in a value like count up, something like that. Or yeah, if we can put count up, and then from here is a self-closing also. We are going to go back to we need some way to actually read out the counter, right? Over here we have our counter here. So that means in our HTML page, we also need some way to put in our count. So let's try this. Count double braces counter. Let's see whether this works. It might not work. Because I see the text doesn't really change. Let's double check. Flask parameters. This is also what you guys can do when you are not 100% sure how to build, how to add a certain feature, how to add a certain string. You won't remember every single thing, so you can end up searching for it. So here we go. We have our minimal application. Let's search for variable. Here we go. Yes, we sync curly braces, I think. So let's do that, I think. Hold on. Blah, blah. Yeah, let's just try it. If I do this, we have our counter. And then so this is roughly what should happen. We have our count and we have our button. Let's go back into our main.py and update our HTML. So right here, yeah, let me just run the code actually. Right here, if we go back to our page, it's going to list out all of this, but you can see that the counter isn't counting. It isn't passing our counter. And a possible reason for that is because we haven't referenced our counter variable from the main.py file. So that's what we're going to do. Counter, we're going to pass a parameter with a variable counter, and we're going to match this with the counter in our main.py file. So the counter here and the counter here are different. And speaking of that, let's do this. So counter var is what we will be using to refer to our homepage or in our HTML. And counter is the variable that is in our main.py file. So this is the differentiate. So going back here, now hold our HTML. Let's update this to counter var. So let's see whether this will work. Otherwise, we might have to double check it. So here we go. Let's refresh our page here. And you can see counter var is properly referenced. It's working. We can it's really working, but it's just that it's not referenced here. So let me just check. Blah blah blah. Variable in web page. Okay, variable in web page. How to display in HTML. Variable. Okay, we are using double curly braces. So let's try that. Double curly braces, something like this. And now we're going to rerun the app. And we take our 100 code. Let's refresh our page. And finally, the count shows up as 0. So if let's say I update our counter to, let's say 1, 2, 3. and I again refresh the app and refresh the page, it shows us 1, 2, 3, which means that our counter variables are working properly. But when I press the button, first of all, it says method not allowed, and that's because we haven't coded it in. But also the one is still exactly the same, which is not what we want. So what we need to do also is to indicate in our app root that is able to accept posts and get requests, and also to update and also be able to update our button to trigger to trigger the update to add on to our account. So how we do that is we are doing sort of an easier way. What we're going to do is we are going to add methods to our app.root. So this method is basically how we access the page. If we have a get request, that basically means we are just getting the web page. But if we have a post request, again, we are sending some data somewhere. So we want to update our counter using that post request. That it will be one of the easier ways to do it. So anyways, the methods that can be accepted by our page is get and post. Make sure to use tabs because that is usually how it's defined, and it helps us differentiate the different strings, the different text in our code. So here, if now we're going to match up that our post request is able to change our counter value. So we're going to type in request, if.request, because it's a request, method double equal post. So what this means is that we want something to happen when we know that the request is a request method type. The request type is a post request. And we also want to update our counter. So we have counter +1. Okay, so that means whenever we send in a post request, it's going to add 1 to our counter. Another way we can put this code to make it shorter is this. This. It basically means the same thing. It's a bit shorter, but it can be a bit confusing if you're not really sure on the plus equals. So I'm just going to leave it like this. And then whether or not, and then what we want to do is after we change the counter, we want the page to re-render, to update and show the updated counter. So whether it's a get request or post request, after any changes are made, we want to re-render that page. Okay, so here, counter equals, counter is updating. So that's our counter, and it's already passed in our HTML. And we are sure that our form is submitted using the post method, the post request, and that should be it. So we're going to rerun our app, and it's going to give us an error. Name request is not defined, and that's true because we haven't also included that in our imports. We need to import request from our Flask library. But other than that, should work. So let's refresh the app. Over here, local variable counter reference before assignment. Okay, that's now that's another possible reason also. Our counter is in a way here, and we also have it inside this if section. So when it's over here, for some reason it's fine, but inside here, things are a bit different. So how do we do it? So how do we get this counter into our homepage function so that we can change it? Okay, it's because we are changing it here. Here, if it's just reading our counter, so it's fine. But if you want to change it, the variable technically doesn't exist in our homepage. So what we can do is, because it's a local variable, the opposite of a local variable is a global variable. Now, it isn't, there are different ways that you can do this, but in our case, just to keep things simple, we're just going to have a global variable in our homepage for our counter, and let's just fix that missing parentheses. So on line 10, we have a global variable counter so that we can change it and then we can update it. Okay, so now let's rerun it and see whether that will fix things. And it does, it works. So if we go back here, refresh it, we have account 123 and we have a button. So if I click the button, you can see that things are changing. And that's because when we press the button, it sends a post request. And that post request is going to change our counter variable in our Flask app. Then it's going to reload the page. And because our page uses the counter variable, is going to update as well. So how do we know that it's actually sending a post request? You can see here. We can see that, hey, there's a post request happening, and this 200 there's no errors. So yeah, that's pretty much it for building your own web page. So this is a very beginner. It's well, that makes it sound bad. It's a good start to helping you understand this is how the web page looks in HTML. And if I want to interact with it, for example, I might need to have a server to run the app on. Let's do something a bit extra. Since we have time, I want to show you guys how in talking about HTML and JavaScript, which in this case is Python, but we haven't really touched on CSS. So there's different ways we can do this, but for a good practice is to put our CSS file in our static file. A good practice to put our CSS file is to put it in the static folder. So I'm just going to click on static and add a full file. And I'm going to add a CSS folder. And then I'm going to add another file and put home.css. So let's say we want to update the design of a button. Maybe let's do a sort of like a blue color, make the background of a button blue. So we're going to, since we have our button input button here. So since we only have one input, it's fine. Let's just put input, and then let's just try putting background color blue. Let's see whether that works. It might work, it might not work. Let's just try it. So we have our input and background color is blue. So now what we want to try to do is to link our CSS file. So we also need a link here. Going back, link CSS file to HTML. We can use a link HTML thing, internal CSS, external CSS. So link, relation or something, style sheet, and then href. So link relation CSS, and then href static CSS / home.css. So this should work. Let's just double check that. Oh, style sheet. So that should be fine. So what we are thinking that is supposed to happen is that our input should change color to have a blue background color. So let's refresh that. Okay, so far so good. It's to get styling. Let's go back here. Oops. And refresh our page. And you can see that it changes. So you can see here, it doesn't really show the text. So let's add one more change. Go back into home CSS and color white. Here, white. So, and here's another thing. In CSS, there is no text color or font color, it's just color. But the background, it has background color. That's how the CSS people and HTML people figured it out. It's confusing, not gonna lie, but this is how they have defined the different CSS parameters. So here what's gonna happen is that our button is supposed to be blue in color and have white text. So let's refresh that, go back to our page and refresh. So now we can see that the text is white, the button is blue, and we are pretty much done. We're like actually done. So what have we done so far? We have basically set up a HTML. We have basically imported a Flask library. And we have originally made a very basic Flask app, which is basically importing Flask, setting the app variable, and then running the app. And then we also, we decided to add a bit more pizzazz. We made a HTML file to add in more information, add in a favicon, add in a title, add in some text. And we want to actually reference that as a HTML template. So we use a render template function. And to help organize our project a bit, we put our home the HTML into templates. And we also specifically tell Flask, hey, we have a template folder called templates. Then after that, we want to add some styling and we want to add our icon. So we tell Flask, hey, we also have some other things in our static folder, which is our CSS and icon file. And then we also include that information, include those references into our head text under the link. Then finally, we have a variable called counter in our main.py. And what it does is that it's basically a counter. And we want to include that as counter var in our HTML. So going back to our HTML, we can check, hold on. We check that counter var with double curly braces when we refer to it, so that it can show the count. So that's what we have here. And another thing that you might notice is that when you rerun the app and you refresh the web page, it should go back into, is it 124 or 125? Give me a second, guys. Okay, it should be 123, right? So let's stop, rerun, and refresh. Okay, so I think it's like increasing the page for some reason. Oh wait, there's a new here, it says 304. Let's just quickly check what it is. HTTP 304. Not modified. There's no need to retransmit the requested resources. Okay, but either way, you'll notice that the count is sort of reset back to 123 or to 123 to any sort of value instead of being set to 127. So let's say I put this right 131. If I rerun and go back to the page, it's supposed to go back to 124, 123. So you can see here, the number in a way returns back to normal. So yeah, that's pretty much an overview of what we went through today. We built a basic web page, we added a button, added some styling, and run all of it on Flask. So that's a lot, but we managed to do it. So if you guys aren't able to catch up, I will also share the link to this repo. Here, I think you should be able to see it. So I'm just gonna copy and paste. You guys can see. Everyone, here we go. There we go. So because you put counter +1. Sort of, yeah. That's sort of the reason is because the request method was post, but for some reason it keeps increasing. But that's fine. If you guys want to explore on your own, by starting from where we left off in this workshop, I already shared the link in the chat if you guys want to check it out. But yeah, that's pretty much, we are done. We managed to finish our workshop with time to spare. But let's say, oh, I already make something really good. I want to share it to my friends or to my family. Previously, you used to be able to use something called Heroku, but Heroku's plans are changing. So now you can consider trying Python Anywhere. So if I open up my Python Anywhere, okay, here is what it will look like. You can make a free account, no worries about that. But if you want to put the Flask app online, like actually online, the good thing is that Python Anywhere offers like free web hosting, as long as you have like pythonanywhere.com at the end. So what you do is that, because I already have a site here, I already configured it, but you can go to Python Anywhere in your dashboard, go to web apps. Because I already have one here, it's going to show mine, but you can just add a new web app. And well, you can only have one web app at a time. But basically, I already configured it to use the our own like file. So once you create a new Python Anywhere file, you're going to go to your files. Once you have already made your own Flask app, you can go into files, and you can see here there's a my site folder. Go to my site, then you import whichever things that you need. For example, I have my favicon in my static images under my site, and I also have my templates, hello.html. An important thing is, once you set up your own Flask app on Python Anywhere, they're going to give you a default Flask app. So you have to go in and either edit it yourself or delete the file and upload your own. So that's how you can set up your own Python Anywhere Flask app. And this is how mine looks like, very basic. But it's one way to maybe show something cool or to sort of practice as a beginner, okay?